Check it. Whether it's your first time or you need a retreat, this is your place for video games and fresh beats. LBnMie, LBnMie, last BeNeVoLeNcE and KimiMie. Even though I grew up poor and without much outside of video games, I would never tell someone that my childhood was boring. It was far from it. Through gaming, we experience so many things that we wouldn't normally be able to experience in real life. Video games can take us places. I say it once, and if you stick around long enough, sometime in the future, you'll definitely hear me say it again. Video games can take you places. But sometimes we like to share those experiences with friends or family. Sometimes you want to pack your bag and camp out with more than just yourself in a single tent. In our review today, we're going to talk about a cooperative tabletop-like RPG that could offer a nice, varied, but simple adventure for someone who'd like to bring a couple of friends along. This is For the King on the Nintendo Switch. Also available for PC, PS4, and Xbox One. For the King starts off in a way that I personally feel more cooperative RPGs should, with a character creation screen. I don't know, I just like personalization, and it always does well to add to the immersion of most experiences, in my humble opinion. When Kimmy and I first played For the King in early access, each player could select between 4 starting classes: the blacksmith, the hunter, the scholar, and the minstrel. But outside of that, you could only change your name and color. That, along with the other 4 unlockable classes, just did the job. It wasn't too simple, but it wasn't anything overboard either. Serviceable. So you could imagine how pleasant of a surprise it was to come back to this game after its full console release and find that they also added an extra layer of personalization options. My favorite addition probably being the option to select each character's gender. They even added unlockable cosmetics in the forms of hats and backpacks and even outfits. Nice little touch. On top of that, you have the 4 unlockable classes from before: the Trapper, Busker, Herbalist, and Woodcutter, as well as 3 new classes that you can unlock by first discovering them within 3 of the campaigns. We won't spoil those for you, but altogether this makes for 11 different playable classes.
I love how it looks. The low poly art style reminds me of paper. It's almost like moving origami. At least that's how I would describe it. I love how it has different selections of character classes and how you can choose to be female or male. I even like customizing a character to look like an old man. The bags are funny looking too, but they are a great idea because it goes well with the thought that each character is packing up for a long journey. There are even different types and sizes of your bag for you to carry that are available to unlock.
Almost everything that you would want in an RPG is present. Loot in the form of weapons, items, trinkets, and armor. A large world to explore, cities with shops and quests, secrets to find, dungeons, goblins, encounters, dungeons with shops ran by goblins, you name it, and it's here. All except maybe the story. That's probably the most notable part of this game that's lacking. If you pay attention to any of the story bits, and trust me, it's hard to, it sort of feels as if the story was an afterthought, just thrown in at the last second. Don't go into this expecting any deep narratives or plot development. What you'll find is a pretty straightforward tale. The king gets murdered, and now you're on a quest to find out who did it. To the credit of the developers, the lack of deep narrative is almost a positive for this particular title. Instead of spending hours watching cutscenes or reading pages of dialogue, you run into short spurts of exposition, taking the backseat to, well, the actual game. The main gameplay loop is reminiscent of a tabletop board game, with each character taking turns to move around and perform actions such as going to towns, battling monsters, entering into dungeons, and engaging with encounters. Oh, plus, everything is randomized. I forgot to mention that part. This is a roguelike title with permadeath that only really kicks in once the entire party is wiped out. No save scumming here, folks, as the only way to save is by exiting the game, and dying means starting over from the beginning with no real progression outside of each playthrough. Sure, there's a lore shop where you can purchase special encounters, loot, characters, and cosmetics, but none of those things really give players a real advantage. I think that's a good thing, as it makes for very interesting and challenging contained experiences. You're not going to be spending hundreds of hours grinding and building out your character, but you'll be finding new things every time you play, and seldom do you find loot that's boring or uninteresting. This makes the core experience somewhat consistent, and I appreciate that about this game. You won't find yourself spending more than 20 minutes tops to find something interesting.
Depending on whether it's day or night, there are different enemies, which makes it more lively, so choices and decisions for where to go and what to do might change depending on the time of day. It's actually challenging, which I like, because even though its turn-based system seems simple, you really need to think hard about what to do next, or else you could pay for it. Strategizing with each other is very essential.
The combat is turn-based, but it utilizes the game's focus system, which acts like its own method of handling energy, or special points. These focus points can be used to give a player a higher success rate, or even give the player perfect success with their attack damage and accuracy. Focus can even be used outside of battle to give the player higher success rates with skill checks during encounters. But would you believe me if I told you that I've played action games with less crunch than this game's turn-based battle system? Ugh. Strong attacks in this game look and sound like they pack an overwhelming punch, and it's so exaggerated that neither could you take them seriously or ignore them at the same time.
The other thing that adds to the fun of For the King is the variety of different enemies, as well as the outfits and weapons you can have. In between playthroughs, you can also unlock new items to appear in later campaigns. In the game, there are monuments that you can discover that can give your character some kind of boost. But if a character with the monument boost dies, the monument crumbles and the character is revived without their boost. I always get excited when I see a statue or monument, but I know I have to be careful because I could lose it. Players can also carry items that they can use to place tents for resting and meditating for focus. This is useful because it lets the party members camp out when they are away from cities or towns. For the King has a little bit of risk and reward in it. It's almost like making bets when seeing if you should use your focus in a situation or if you should rely on how good a character is at something.
I like to keep things positive, especially with games that I really enjoy, like this one. But sometimes it does feel like corners were cut with this game and some features. For example, the music. I personally feel that this game deserves a much better soundtrack. The music feels so lifeless. Even the battle music lacks luster, and while I do appreciate the out of place and probably unintentional ode to the theme song of my favorite superhero show, Arrow, I never once found any of the battle music to be particularly exciting, and the rest of the soundtrack seemed to just feel weak. A good soundtrack can really make a difference in a game, and I really wish I could play this game with music more similar to something like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, or maybe even a Fire Emblem game or a Dragon Quest title. I know it's unfair to compare it with AAA titles such as those, but I just feel like they could have done just a bit better. Despite that, I do appreciate that each new area has a slightly different sound to match each locale. That was a nice touch, at least. Another slight nitpick, and this is just for me, but I think that the towns and some of the encounters would have been greatly enhanced with close-up backgrounds to give us a better visual of what they would look like, similar to the way battles and dungeons are displayed. I always find myself feeling a bit disconnected with towns and the encounters in the game, while dungeons always tend to be, pretty immersive. But those are just my personal takes. For the King is definitely not a title to sleep on, especially with the price point of less than half the damage your usual AAA game would deal to your wallet. And in some cases, it might even offer more replayability with randomized maps, loot, world structure, and encounters, along with its 6 different campaigns.
I still can't believe that there was a developer out there that could think of such a cool game like this. But I know that many might not like it because of how it's very different from most of other games that are popular. It has a slower pace than other games, but finding new things and beating bad guys always feels so accomplishing for me, and that's why I love this game.
Finally, the feeling that one would get in a classic JRPG of traveling the world map from place to place, adventuring into forests, deserts, and exploring caves and dungeons is here. You can completely share this experience with a friend or two, and each time you play, it's like living out many different lives. Perhaps it's not perfectly realized, although quite close. Just enough to pull you in to revisit this hidden gem time and time again.
I received a letter from the queen one day. The king's dead by an unknown assassin's blade. So it's off out of the bed I lay, cause it seems like today we got some evil to slay. Party up with the heroes from the way, from the home where I stay. Stock up on supplies in the day. Grab God gears for the dangers we face. Okay, let's be up on our way. Hey, step 1, step 2, 3, space. If you keep the pace, chaos will be erased in this once peaceful place. No time to waste, make haste until our minstrel amp the bass. Cause we can't sit around and play games while evil reigns, lands blaze and strange flames. We have a job to keep our domain safe. No, we're not here to gain fame for namesake. Perhaps we don't know what today brings. Chaos or peace, normal, the strange things. But the three of us will continue to sing about this tale of our quest for the king. We can spend many days to say things about how we spent many moons to slay fiends, claim dreams of peace promised like vain rings. In this tale of our quest for the king, perhaps we don't know what today brings. Chaos or peace, normal, the strange things. But the three of us will continue to sing about this tale of our quest for the king. We can spend many days to say things about how we spent many moons to slay fiends, claim dreams of peace promised like vain rings. In this tale of our quest for the king, in our quest for the king, in our quest for the king, for the king. In this tale of our quest for the king, in our quest for the king, in this tale of our quest for the king.
Shout out to our Patreon supporters, Phil Giannikis and DeMarket Davis.